Welcome to another episode of the DADE podcast. I am Nick Jimenez, and on this episode, I am joined by John Falco, founding partner at Lincoln's Beard. Is there like a parent company I should call out here, or is it just Lincoln's Beard?
Lincoln's Beard. I mean, obviously, it's our our DBA, our main name is South Florida Craft Beer, which is like the most boring LLC name ever. But
yeah,
wide range. But no, Lincoln's Beard Brewing, man.
All right, that's Lincoln's Beard Brewing. You still consider yourself the head brewer?
So, I never know what my title is. I probably consider myself, I always put co-owner.
Okay. At
this point, I'm probably director of operations, I'd say. But definitely not the head brewer. I'd say brewmaster.
Okay. So
yeah.
we'll get deeper into all that. But
absolutely.
Founding partner, brewmaster in Lincoln's Beard.
Hype man, whatever.
And that is where we're recording this interview. Unfortunately, our cameras don't go wide enough to show you all of the coolest shit art that's all over the place here. But luckily for us, we're at a brewery, which means we get to do this over some beers, which is cool. Yeah, cheers.
Salud, cheers.
To working over beer. Thanks for having me. In this conversation, we will get into things like brewing, your military career, entrepreneurship, how neighborhoods develop around businesses, and character that entrepreneurs can introduce. But first, a shout out for another couple of entrepreneurs who sponsor this series. You should head over to Bandago. They offer affordable, adorable, handcrafted, reversible dog bandanas for your fur family members who are naked, and everybody is super pissed that they can see your dog's naked body. At least cover their necks with these bandanas. They're based in Gainesville, Florida, where they make handcrafted bandanas. They'll ship them to you in extra small, medium, large, or XL. I don't know what those mean in dog terms. I guess it's like dog years, but I'm sure they have sizing charts and the whole thing. Buybandago.com. I have one for my dog. I've put it on my dog. He looks better with it than without it. You should also do that. Your dog is naked. Again, everybody's super pissed. And you can solve that using promo code DADE20. That's DADE20. That's it. That's the first thing. So now we can get into the thing. So I don't know how many of the people who are watching this are going to be all that familiar with your story. Sure. And so to me, though, one of the things that's the most interesting about it is, and it's one of the things that I like to kind of, home in on when I'm talking to people about the things they do, is how they ended up there. So you're from this area originally. We're near like Westchester, West Miami, suburb of Greater. It's not an area that a lot of tourists would generally end up. It's not a place that ends up in a lot of magazines or movies. Not at all. But you grew up in this area. Yep. So tell me a little bit about what your time in this area was like, which I'm especially interested in because you're sort of you're part of a transformation in the area. And how you ended up, what led you to your military career, which we'll get into later.
Sure. I my early decisions in life were always kind of on a whim, and I guess that's the short story. So longer story is, I grew up right here in Westchester, although we always say we're in Westchester. Everyone thinks this is Westchester. We claim it as Westchester. It should be Westchester. Technically, we're in a weird, we're sandwiched between West Miami and Westchester in an area called Glenvar Heights, which no one that's listening to this has probably ever heard of unless they're cartographer or whatever.
I grew up 15 minutes away. I didn't know Glenvar Heights existed until I started working here.
Exactly right. So essentially we're in Westchester. So I grew up in Westchester, a little bit west of here. Went to Cypress Elementary, Riviera Middle. Moved out of town. Obviously followed my dad. I was a young kid to Eastern North Carolina. Spent my first 3 years of high school there. Moved back right before my senior year, which absolutely sucks, of course. And moved to West Kendall. So West Kendall, went to Sunset High School over there, all public school, and got out of there and went on the standard South Floridian path of FIU. And was walking around FIU. Honestly, and I was kind of misdirected, in a sense that I had no direction. It was a total lack of direction, vice of poor direction. I was just kind of grinding through school because that's what my parents wanted me to do, and which is good reason any, I guess. But and I saw a girl in a whose name absolutely escapes me, but she was wearing a blue uniform. No one in my family, deception of I think one of my cousins was a Marine for a few years during Desert Storm, but no one in my family was ever in the military. So I asked her, what she was wearing there, what that was. She explained it as Air Force ROTC, which is essentially, most folks have heard of JROTC, which is in high school. So ROTC is college version of that,
Right.
which ultimately results in a commission as an officer into the military. So this was Air Force ROTC. So that was at the University of Miami. So I went over to the University of Miami, talked to at the time, Captain Miller, who is now one of my regulars here, which is fantastic.
Nice.
And he dragged me into the Air Force. I was not kicking and screaming. He dragged me in by my own free will, and went into the Air Force. After about 2 years commissioned in as an intelligence officer. Spent about 7.5 years active doing that. Got out, joined, got a job with the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is kind of the CIA of the Defense Department.
Yeah.
And absolutely hated it.
How long did it take you to figure out you hated it?
Pretty quick.
Okay.
But probably the first time I tied a tie, right? So, and it's a great job for those that enjoy that. I enjoy Excel spreadsheets, right? I enjoy weird things. Some people enjoy other things, but for me, I did not enjoy working for the DIA. And ultimately, what was driving along one day, and I looked over at a little shitty strip mall, and I said, someone should open a beer bar that day, or should open a beer bar right there. Fast forward 2 years, we did not open a beer bar there. We traveled about 30 miles south, and we opened a beer bar or brewery here in Glenmore Heights. So, and that's where we are now, and kind of all those decisions were kind of on a whim, but it felt right. It was a gut decision. I've made many decisions, as we all have, my gut decisions in my life that have been poor, but this one just worked out. So, and that's why we're here, and it's been an absolute amazing, amazing time. A little bit nerve-wracking leaving, the cushy government job, but we're here now, and it's a fun time. I mean, what I'm doing right now with you is great, and this is never.
This isn't a bad way to be on the clock. Yeah,
this is fantastic, right? We're drinking beer, talking with good people, talking good company, and when you work in intelligence for almost 15 years, you're paid to not talk to people. Quite literally. So going from having to do an iris scan to getting to work every day, to be able to wear a hoodie and shorts and drinking beer and on the clock is pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
So
what was it about the military? What part of you was that tickling? Because you were dragged in of your own volition, which I imagine means that there was something about it that you were drawn to, or that kept you in for a certain amount of time.
It was intriguing. I knew nothing about it. It's kind of the same personality trait or flaw or whatever you want to call it that dragged me into beer. I didn't understand it, and the concept of not understanding something has always driven me nuts. So I didn't understand it. So start with it's Tarantino, this, right? So start by I drank beer. I liked the beer. I didn't understand it, so I learned how to make it. I looked in the military. I was always fascinated by military. My father was in the airline industry, so I spent a lot of time around aircraft. I was fascinated by the Air Force. Didn't know a lick about it. Didn't even know what the uniform was, right? So I jumped in and I started learning about it, and that's really what it was. And you get into the Air Force, it's kind of a young man and woman's game. There's a lot of young folks in there, and you learn so much about it. And you meet so many amazing people, travel, quite literally travel the world, everywhere from Korea to Iraq to Germany to France to Italy to Alabama. So, it's just really fucking interesting, man.
Yeah.
Really, really, and that's really what drew me in.
That was the part of you that was being tickled by it.
Yeah, man.
What would you say you took from it? And let's use that as a way to sort of, what did you take from it? And how, if at all, has that served you in not only in this business, but maybe even what was the transition like before we get to the brewing? What was the transition like just out of the military and then finding something like being a home brewer, which I imagine has to have been, there's something about it without having done either of those two things that I imagine is just very different. Where you're exercising different muscles in each of those two things.
Yeah. So to answer the first part of the question, which is an awesome question, I had the opportunity to kind of give a talk the other day, which I always feel like I'm horribly underqualified for, but I guess everyone could talk about themselves,
Yeah.
To some folks over here the other day, and that was kind of one of the topics they wanted me to talk about. So I think there's a couple things. Anytime someone that's former military or veteran talks about going into entrepreneurship or going to do whatever, the first thing you do is always talk about work ethic, right? I feel, I'm not too ignorant. I'm not ignorant enough to think that my work ethic wasn't improved, but I feel like it was a very subconscious kind of improvement of my work ethic. I think what I really took from the military was nothing I did. I think it was observing other people, observing amazing leaders, observing really poor leaders, observing social dynamics. Just getting older, right? Just spending 12 to 15 years doing something, doing anything. But really the one thing, and I run this brewery exactly like I ran, I had the opportunity to be a leader and a manager in the military too. I run it exactly the same way. In the military, as long as you're busting your ass and you don't screw anything up, you're not going to get fired. So the good thing about that, especially in the government, forget about it. It's impossible to get fired. The good thing about that is it allows you to fail a little bit. It allows you to fail without worrying about failing. When there's absolutely no profit driving you.
Right.
Bad for the taxpayers, good for the employee in a sense that, one, you could just not do anything, which is what maybe even the majority of government employees do, but that was never me. But the other thing you could do is like really stretch your legs, and it's a really ripe environment, and that environment, I really enjoyed. It's a very empowering environment. The Air Force is very good about empowering both their officers and their enlisted and all their folks, and so I took all the things I failed at and I learned in the military and watching others, people watching, is like my favorite hobby, right? All that I learned from other people and other leaders, I really apply it here, which is kind of exactly what I talked about, which is empowering the individual, giving them free rein to run, not micromanaging, knowing the separation between friendship and subordinate,
Right.
Little things like that where a lot of new entrepreneurs and a lot of new leaders fail. I did all that failing earlier in my life. I'm 38 now. I started when I was 36. I made a major life change at 36, and I'll make another one at 76 if I want to, because I think it's never too late. But that was kind of the first thing, I took from that. What was the second part of the question?
No. So yeah, what did you take from it? And just to talk a little bit about that transition, right? You made that major life change.
Yeah.
And
Home brewing and stuff.
Yeah, what were some of the biggest adjustments that you were making? Because you're taking all those lessons, but at the same time, I imagine even for example, I'm anybody who's seen enough of these things, I've mentioned that my day job is at Cigar Snob magazine, and I think we have
awesome
a little bit of that in
magazine,
common, right? Like
awesome magazine.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
But
Really
I show up in shorts and flip flops sometimes, and a hoodie if I'm dressing way the hell up, and
Exactly.
smoking at my desk. And before that, I was at a software company in Wisconsin, which was not like super. It was a software company. It wasn't an investment bank or anything, but
Sure.
there's an adjustment there.
Oh yeah.
I imagine for you that must have been sort of an extreme thing. So talk about that transition and maybe how coming from where you came from presented hurdles. Because you know some of you learn some valuable lessons about subordinates and leaders and what the proper roles of things are, but at the same time, if I imagine you can't treat everything with military level strictness when you're coming into the brewing world.
Yes, that is a very that's fantastic. And that's something I've never really talked about. Right? What are those limitations on an individual? My personality, now the Air Force is very widely known to be much more, for lack of what is I'm sure way better terms, much more casual than fighting forces and the Marines, than the Army, and we don't have
all that shirtless volleyball.
Yeah, exactly. And the Navy, right? So that and the Navy has the Navy, which is certainly more casual than the Marines and the Army. But they have hundreds of years of transition. I mean, the Air Force was formed in 1947, right? So we the Navy calls a water fountain a scuttlebutt. We call it a water fountain, right? So there's nothing wrong with the Navy, and that's really intriguing stuff. But we never had that tradition. So what did that allow me to do? It kind of allowed me to maintain my personality, which I've always kind of been. Whether I've had to repress it or not, I've always kind of been this kind of punk rock guy. Like I don't. And my wife was here; she'd be nodding her head violently. Like I've never liked to do what I didn't want to do, and and this is an absolute fault of mine, but I don't really do what I don't want to do, you know, and my partners would probably be nodding their head too. I listen, I'm receptive, and I will flex kind of my own personal direction to the right direction if someone has a better idea and a better concept, and my employees would probably agree with that, I hope. So I've always kind of had that, I'm just going to kind of do it my way mentality. Got me in a little bit of trouble in the military and the government, but ultimately I was pretty effective. And by I mean really my teams that worked for me. They were effective, and like any good, good leader, you pass on that credit, but as it's deserved. But the flip side of that, is there were some absolute traits and some things you could do in the military and strictness and just analness and borderline OCD kind of behavior that when you transition into, especially, people work in this industry, in the food and beverage industry, not because it's, like, you have two options in the beer world. You could brew, which much like a kitchen, much like a chef or a cook, it's not the best paying job, but it's a job that very, very few jobs allow you to apply science and still be creative. It's just a weird blend, and human, that's a very, very amazing blend for the human person. So people that choose to be a chef or people that choose to be a brewer instead of, being an accountant, and they're willing to accept that pay cut, don't want to be treated like they're, sergeants in boot camp, right? Or sorry, that they're, they're squirts in boot camp, right? Or boots, as the Marines call them, right? So, and not that I've ever treated anyone that way, but, the worst always comes out in everyone when you're upset or you're not happy or whatever. So there have absolutely been many times where, I've been a little more militant than I should be. And the way I combat that is my staff combats that. My staff knows, and the times when it's going well, I always emphasize to my folks, talk to me. You will never be punished for talking to me, for being open, being honest with me. Call me and say, dude, you're being an asshole. With all due respect, like Ricky Bobby, right? I think that's the poor choice. If I sit with my head brewer and we lay out a whole bunch of options on a beer, and he thinks we should do A, and I go, we're going to do B. He's going to execute A, awesome, we'll execute it both. If it's a failure, I'm going to say, you were right. And it's happened many, many times. Right. And the more times he's right, the more I realize I need to start bending my will to what he's doing. And the same thing goes with my taproom manager. The more times she's right, the more I say, maybe I need to get off my horse and start trusting her gut, And I think that's really what makes a good manager. And it has bit me in the ass a little bit, a little too militant. So
you're one of 6 partners in the business. How many of the other 5 also have military backgrounds?
So there are, let's see here. Of the 6 partners, myself and myself and 2 others have military experience. Scott, who's a Navy man, retired Navy man, and Rob, who's a Army CI guy. Scott was Navy intelligence too. And then the other 3, Todd, Barb, and V. So Barb and V worked in the government V's still working in the government, but Barb worked in government for over 30 years. Okay. And V's still working in the government now. Both of their husbands retired military. And then Todd, who's the one who's our CFO, he was actually the next door neighbor of a good friend of mine named Brock, who was a Canadian Special Forces guy. He was an exchange officer working with me. So, he's like honorary military, but no, he was never military. So, 3 of the 6 are prior military. 5 of the 6 are directly connected to military, and then one of the 6.
So how did that group come together? Was that did the military, or is it just coincidence, or you guys knew each other from the military?
No.
Or?
DIA. You know,
Yeah, okay.
I knew Rob, Scott, V, and Barb.
Okay.
I worked with all of them. So I you know, they're good friends of mine, still friends of mine, and I approached them and said, hey, you know, I obviously there was a much longer conversation. I had a plan, and we talked through it.
Yeah.
But the very short of it was, hey, I have this idea. Here's the concept. Here are kind of the stats. Here's where beer's going. You know, and I would be honored if you guys would, you know, accept this risk with me and get into it. You know, and they were and still are amazing people, and they took that leap with me, and they did. And really the same thing with Todd. You know, I mean, Brock was initially part of it, but he got transferred back to Canada. It wasn't feasible for him to continue to be a part of it. So, you know, Todd kind of filled his role, and
Yeah.
I don't want to say filled his role. He was a part of it anyway, but and that was it. So the six of us, you know, they were just really amazing people that trust me with it, and you know, we've done some amazing things here together. So
you mentioned they're trusting you.
Yeah.
I imagine by then, though, they'd had something you'd made at some point, right?
Yes.
It wasn't a
Yes.
totally blind
No.
leap, right? They at least
Correct.
believed, like, okay, this guy knows a good beer when he tastes it, and he can make a good beer.
Correct. Yeah, the beer doesn't suck.
Yeah.
You know, and they knew my work ethic from the military. You know, I always busted my ass. You know, so they recognized our work ethic. They said, hey, the beer doesn't suck.
Did any of the rest of them have any kind of a beer or even home brewing background? Or
No, not at all. Matter of fact, and this is almost cringeworthy, because if I was someone sitting out here looking at myself
Like,
trying
what
to
are
open a
you
brewery, none of us had a lick. I mean, I don't think any of us ever even bartended or waited a table. Maybe a couple of them.
Yeah.
I know I didn't. None of us had any substantial food and beverage experience. And we opened with all the outside space, about an 8,000 square foot nightlife spot in the middle of an underserved area, which is just nightmare. But, you know, it worked out. You know, we had gut feelings on a lot of things. We went with them, and it worked out. Now it's great, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, we to me, I feel there's about a time around the 18 to 20 month mark where I remember sitting in my house thinking, I think I kind of almost know what I'm doing now. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
I think I kind of almost know what the hell I'm doing now, and that's where we're at, man. That's where we're at. But yeah, no substantial experience.
Yeah.
Beer drinkers.
So you mentioned that, you know, you sort of described to them your plan and the vision for the whole thing. How closely? Well, talk about what that vision was, and, you know, especially for people who haven't been here or maybe won't have the opportunity to come here.
Yeah.
What was that vision, and how closely does it line up with where you ended up?
I think it's exactly for me. I think it's exactly where I ended up.
Okay.
You know, for the other five, I think it's probably close. You know, they've trusted me to come this far, kind of with the operations of the place, and, you know, anytime you could have two people, right? You could have two people who think they think exactly alike, but, you know, quote unquote, but really. It's something as small as, like, I think this table should go there. No, I think this table should go there. You know, ultimately, someone's got to get, you know, got to choose where that table goes.
Yeah.
You know, and ultimately, you know, they've kind of trusted me to move that ball in that direction. You know, and some months have been better than others, but ultimately, you know, we keep moving forward, and so I would say, from my perspective, kind of where Lincoln Spirit is now is very, it's a pretty good representation of my vision. Now, that being said, when we first started, obviously my vision has transformed a little bit.
Sure.
So, but yeah.
So what did that, if you had, when you were describing to them what you wanted to do, you know, without getting into the minutia of the business plan,
of course.
what did you have in your head? And I think, you know, especially keeping in mind, you know, and what I want to move into from here is, you know, the role that this brewery plays in this broader shift and transformation that's happening in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
What was your vision, and how much did that play a role? Because you had to have known, especially having grown up here,
Yeah.
there was something at the very least new, if not outright risky and crazy, about, like, hey, let's build not like a brew pub, like a legit brewery
Yeah.
in Glenvar Heights.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people come in here and say, man, you're a genius for opening this here.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be real with you. When I opened this, the way I sold this place was, there's a lot of traffic on Bird Road. the craft beer industry. This is in 2016. The craft beer industry is fucking exploding, right? So maybe we'll get some of that traffic and we'll be able to pay our bills. What I didn't know, even being from here, is that there's this like, gentrification is the wrong word because it was never a bad neighborhood, but there's this like, you know, like a Yogi Bear, Charles Barkley here, youthification of this of this area, you know, where you have this like, you know, late 20s to late 30s kind of, you know, young families moving in here. I did not expect that. So I did not expect there to be this major, you know, amount of regulars that move in here. And if you look at our crowd versus like a Wimbledon crowd or a beach crowd, they're a little older. You know, I feel like we're between like 35 and 45, or even 30 and 45 is kind of like our demographic here.
Yeah.
And they're incredibly loyal, the folks here. You know, I love them to death. They're family now. So I never expected that. Knowing what I know now, I mean, the only way is up in this area. The demographic in this area is amazing, you know. And now we did look at the fact that we got Coral Gables there, we got South Miami there, you know, we got Westchester, which is a lot of suburban homes. We got Kendall over there, which at the time, you know, Spanish Marie was around. There was nothing over there.
Yeah.
So we knew that. We knew there was a lot of traffic out here, but I kind of got lucky. To be honest with you, you know, I got lucky, which is fine. You know, which is fine. So
what has the feedback been from some of the people in this area, right? Because I think a lot of times you mentioned it not quite being gentrification.
Yeah.
But I wonder whether, you know, and this is something that I think people in almost any city can relate to, because there are neighborhoods where things like this happen, and almost invariably, like, there's some kind of resistance. Like, maybe there were people who just weren't crazy about the idea of like, oh, traffic's all, you just said traffic was heavy. Yeah. Some people must have been thinking, well, shit, now we're just giving more people a reason to drive here and clog up the roads. So there is that element, right, of like, this is bringing something new to this neighborhood, making it more vibrant. And then, did you get any of that sort of curmudgeonly pushback from
you know,
from the Glenvora Heights denizens?
Not really. No, not really. I mean, outside of no, this is an industrial area, right? Sure. Nothing moves here except for junky cars. You know,
and it's kind of a weird one, right? Because it's an industrial area, but it's like an industrial warehouse pocket of a suburban residential area.
It's really
strange.
It's really, and it's old. I mean, this has been, relatively old. It's not like the Falls, which is new. It's not like, you know, Hialeah, which is nothing but industrial. I mean, this you know, the eastern west part of Hialeah, but I didn't get much pushback. Now the neighbors, some of the neighbors, the car shops around here, they love me because they come in and drink here. Yeah. But some of the neighbors,
which is good to know as somebody who gets his car work done.
Yeah, exactly, right? Usually it's after shift, maybe at lunch. Not gonna mention any names, but the other neighbors weren't necessarily too happy, you know, because the challenge is at the time, you know, Dade County they said brewing is an industrial act, which it kind of is. I mean, we have some waste products and stuff like that, you know, but if you brew, to really make any money, distro is incredibly tough, right? Unless you're on a large scale. So distro just meaning like the sending kegs out to bars and stuff. Yeah. So you got to kind of have a tap room, and it's legal to have a tap room in an industrial area. But to have a tap room, you got to have parking. So you got to mandate parking. So it's kind of between a rock and a hard place. So it's a constant battle with me and battle's probably a bad word, but it's a constant discussion between me and my neighbors to try to stay civil. But that's it. But the folks around here, they love it. You know, they love it. You know, and we don't have that kind of douchey vibe. You know, with, you know, fucking, you know, where there's fights every night. You know, we've had one fight here, and it was like these young girls fighting over a dude, which is, we named the beer after it. It was all good, but.
What's the name of the beer?
What are you doing that's positive? That's a great story too. By the way.
Now we need to hear it.
Yeah, you got to hear the story.
Yeah, for sure.
So it took about 2.5 years to get a fight here. So it was a Wednesday night around 12:30.
I like how you said, like, we were really hoping it'd be like inside of 6 months.
Yeah. No, we're not. Last thing we need is a fight. But that's rare. It's like, I mean, dude, I grew up going to South Beach, you know, like in the 90s, and like if there was that's how you knew when to go home. Oh, there's a fight. All right, must be late. Let's go home. Right? You guys get it. But yeah, so the long short of it, I was sitting there. I'm never here Wednesdays late, right? But I was here Wednesday about 12:30. Long short, I look over and there's this little, like, you know, kind of 5'1" little, woman, 22-year-old woman, just throws a haymaker at a girl she came with, by the way. And I think she might have missed or maybe connected. I don't know. So her boyfriend grabs her. We kick them both out. I'm like, guys, you listen, both you ladies, you can come back whenever you want, just not today. You got to go, right? So they're sitting out. And the one young girl, she was like frothing in the mouth angry, dude. She was furious, like kicking, screaming, horrible obscenities. Her boyfriend had her like in a bear hug, just saying like, calm down, honey, you got to calm down. And she was not calming down. And then I think he like ran out of things to tell her. And I was just right next to him going, guys, I'm sorry, you really need to go. And he just looks her in her like angry red frothing face. And he's like, what are you doing that's positive? And I just thought it's like, I remember like I literally looked away and said, that is the best shit I've ever heard in my life. I'm like, what? There's nothing like, I would have like opted for like, you need to shut the fuck up. Like I feel like that would have been much more effective than he's like, sure. Let's have an intervention.
What are you doing?
Like, let's have an intervention. I've never felt so bad. I've never felt so bad for a dude. What are you doing that's positive? And I didn't even fucking affect her, But
do they come back and drink? What are you doing that's positive?
I don't know, man.
Oh man,
I don't know. But the next day I came in and I told my head brewer Monty about it, and he cracked up. I'm like, he goes, we should name a beer that. I go, well, we do have a beer in the tank, we don't have a name for it. He's like, done. So that was it, man.
Game over.
It's a great beer, too. It's one of my favorite beers. It's actually on tap right now. So, at least as of the time of recording this. But yeah, man. But, yeah.
Very cool. So, speaking of the beers themselves.
Sure.
Talk a bit about, the craft beer is, I want to say new, but it's definitely still sort of like burgeoning.
Yeah.
In South Florida in general,
Sure.
but especially in Miami.
Yeah, man.
Talk a bit about what that scene looks like now. Again, especially sort of with the person in mind who has not been down here and visited breweries, and where you guys fit in there, and sort of a slightly different take on the previous question about your vision. How much of your vision for the brewing itself?
Yeah.
Was just your own personal preferences, and how much of it was you trying to identify, voids or things that seemed like they were missing from Miami beer?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's difficult to answer. One thing I will say is one of my favorite quotes about beer comes from my head brewer, and he actually said it during his interview. One of the main reasons I hired him. He said, actually he said this in context of the really main reason I hired him, which I asked him who he brews for, and he says, I brew for my wife. And I thought that was a very selfless thing. He literally brewed almost exclusively wheat beers just to for his wife. She liked wheat beer. She loved his beer. Her name's Victoria. She's fantastic. And I thought it was awesome. And he goes, hey, it's only art if there's an audience, which is absolutely, an opinion. And I was like, dude, that's a fantastic point of view, And then the other thing, folks say is you are not your customer, So it's really, really important. Goes without saying, but it's really, really important to understand that no one gives a shit what I want to drink.
Right.
None of my customers order based on, let's see, what would John want right now? That never goes through anyone's mind. So we do not brew a beer here. Well, we rarely brew a beer here if we don't think it's going to go over well. We've brewed a couple beers, like we brewed some smoked beers and stuff like that have sold really slowly. They're coming out really well, but onesie twosie people like.
Yeah, you give yourself some room to experiment too. You don't have to.
What a perfect example. Our beer, P. Swayze, is by far our most popular beer. It's our IPA, P. Swayze IPA. It's got a little bit of kind of a cult following down here in South Florida, which is great. Personally, I never order it. I don't even like IPAs.
Okay.
But like 60% of the beer we brew here is IPAs because people love it. People love IPAs down here, so we keep brewing IPAs and try to make better IPAs because, I like to drink beer, but it's, if my love for drinking beer is like a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10, me watching other people enjoy beer that my folks here brew and that we brew as a company is a 10. So that's always going to be the driver of what we want to do. Now, all that being said, we have a very loose and wide ethos on brewing, and we always stay within that ethos. We're not going to do something here because it's popular, because we just don't believe in that. We brew things. We like creating, like Steve Jobs says, creating great things. So we create what we think is great as long as it fits within the scope of what our customers are going to drink.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you are brewing, or when you were a home brewer, you were brewing for yourself.
Sure.
So what do you tend to go for? And if you had to point to something that is made here that most closely reflects your own beer sensibilities, what would it be?
Yeah, dude. So, I'm 38, right? So I grew up, first thing I ever drank was a red Solo cup, half full with Southern Comfort. So nothing like that. But then Bud Ice. I drank a shit ton of Bud Ice. The Penguin, for anyone that remembers that. And that was horrible. But ultimately, I slowly got into what I thought, man, beer is awesome. And I still think it's good, is Newcastle, right? Which is like a light drinking malt forward beer. And that's still kind of my wheelhouse. I mean, honestly, when I leave this brewery, if I'm almost always too lazy to bring a growler home, right? I mean, I'll never sit down and drink 4 beers. So I'll go to the store and I'll get a 6-pack or a 12-pack. If there's some local craft, I'll grab it. But ultimately it's like Modelo or like Negro Modelo, right? So it's like it's like crushable light beer or crushable slightly darker beer, right?
Sure.
And that's really my wheelhouse, man. That's really my wheelhouse. So for us, that's Lincoln's Best. Lincoln's Best is a blonde or a sparkling or whatever the hell it is. It's like it's got a little bit of corn in it. Very similar to Modelo, very clean, very crisp. We're actually taking that to distro very soon. Like Mad Men. So I love that. And then I love Avenge Me, which is our Irish Red. It's really dry, easy to drink, slightly darker. It's really in that wheelhouse. So, but like what we're drinking now, which is a rye stout with dulce de leche and toasted hazelnuts, which we toasted ourselves here with the folks from the Westchester, which is our kitchen back here. I like drinking that too, I like drinking that, but stuff that's bitter and kind of biting, I'm not a hophead, man. I'm boring.
Yeah.
I'm a boring beer dude.
So you mentioned the dulce de leche that's in this. Talk a bit about how, so some of that was about how you and your customers, inform what you're brewing. Talk a bit about how Miami and South Florida inform what you're brewing, because it's obviously not an accident. You're not going to show up in like New England and find dulce de leche and guava, on a beer list. So talk a bit about that, about how being here, and especially, I don't know, I assume last name Falco, and without the Cuban accent and the whole thing that you're not Hispanic, but it's, I think there's even something interesting about, I think the outside looking in image of Miami is that, it's a bunch of Hispanic people eating plantains and finding a way to put it in their beers, but it's not. It's
almost accurate.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my point is not that that's not happening. It's that it's not just the Hispanic people who are into that. So talk a bit about how Miami informs the beer and what goes into it and what works and doesn't work that maybe wouldn't be the case elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah. So quick hit. So Falco's my father's side. Italian, right? Italian, just from a little kind of redneck. I always call it like a redneck town just east of Naples, Italy, called Rotondi, which is ironically enough where Tony Soprano is notionally from in the movie Sopranos. Or in the show Sopranos.
Yeah.
Totally irrelevant to this question, but fun fact. Good show, by the way. But no, but my mother's side is she was born in San Salvador, so her father's from San Salvador, her mother's from Sabana Grande in Puerto Rico, last name Alberto. But I grew up down here.
So when's the Mofongo beer coming?
Yeah, exactly. Right. soon. We got to find a way to put plantains in this either way. But no, we have, Cuban food is so good. I eat it almost every day. It's so good. But what we have down here in Florida is we have fruits that are just nowhere else in the United States. Fruits. Just yesterday I had a fruit from brought to us by the folks at Urban Oasis, which is a nonprofit. You should definitely look them up. Amazing nonprofit. A fruit called Gambuge, which is a local fruit, and it's called a false mangosteen. It tastes like a mango warhead is the best way to put it. It's so sour, it tastes just like a warhead, but it has mango characteristic. Yeah, and who doesn't love warheads, right? there's that. I mean, Mame, it's amazing. I mean, who the hell knows what Mame is outside of probably Dade County? I mean, people in Fort Lauderdale, I guess, probably have no idea what the hell Mame is. So we just have this amazing amount of great local fruit, and that goes really, really well in beers down here, in sours, in IPAs, in anything. So being able to leverage that's amazing. And then we have also amazing, sweets, dulce de leche, guava. Guava, we've put fruit guava in beers. And really what people want, we made one beer called Pastelito Diet, right?
Okay.
Which we put a whole bunch of milk
That's
sugar.
That's the diet I'm on right
exactly,
now.
Exactly, right? A whole bunch of milk sugar, lactose to back sweeten it, and we put a whole bunch of guava in there, and it tasted like a pastelito.
Yeah.
And people loved it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
So we have I've been all around the world, man, and I'm not a chef by any means, but I still think Cuban pastries are the best damn pastries in the world. And I've had French pastries and Italian pastries, which I love, but Cuban pastries are so damn good. So, but having all that influence of sweet and fruit and stuff down here is just amazing, And so we utilize that whenever we possibly can.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what I want to end on is, considering that you took your home brewing hobby and spun it into this business, which is expanding, and we can talk a bit about that expansion maybe at the end. But what would you say you took from that you would want to relay to somebody, whether they're brewing or whatever else, who wants to take a passion project and turn it into their livelihood?
Yeah. Here's what I'll say. I start from the second I started. I kept one bottle of my first batch, which is a Fat Tire clone. Tasted nothing like Fat Tire Amber, but it was still yummy. And I saved it because I said one day when I own a brewery, I'm going to pop it open for me and the head brewer. And I did that probably about a year ago. And it tasted not disgusting, which was great.
Mission accomplished.
It was my first batch of beer ever. Right? We didn't die. We didn't have botulism, which is awesome. But the key point to take away from that is that I always expected to make this my business.
Okay.
Understand that the second you start taking $1 for one of your passions, it changes the game a little bit. So just understand that. But I've been asked this question many times, and I always answer it the same way. And I always say, do what you love, as long as you're good at it. And you got to be able to make that tough decision if you're not, because your friends aren't going to tell you. They're going to tell you you're the best brewer. They're going to tell you the best cook. They're going to tell you the best artist, the best journalist ever. So find someone that will actually critique you. Do what you love, as long as you're good at it, and there's a market for it. Yeah. Because, you could, if you wanted to make hand-painted pint glasses, you might be an amazing artist. You might be able to blow your own glass. But you know who's going to buy hand-painted pint glasses? Like 3 people that feel bad for you at the farmer's market, and you're not going to make a living out of it. So, and failing, because there's no market, failing at something that you love and you're good at is pretty fucking crushing. So just be ready for that. So you got to answer those tough questions.
All right. So before we move on to that last stuff, where we'll just talk about how you're expanding and then also where people should go to look you up and all that, we're going to drop a mention of Carlito's Way. Carlos, my partner in all this DADE stuff, who is behind the cameras right now nodding, has another little side hustle.
Nice.
Most people think that all protein is the same. It is not. If you saw Carlos's sexy body, you know how well this shit works.
He's shredded. I'm looking at it right now. I'm a bit embarrassed to be looking at it, to be honest
Imagine pulling up to a gas station with more than 50 pumps, each with a different quality of fuel and each with a different price. That is the protein marketplace, and it is very confusing. Some of the world's top athletes use the exact same stuff that is in Carlito's Way. That's Carlito's, W-H-E-Y. You see what he did there?
Yes.
Carlito's Way as a recovery supplement. So, Carlos is a big fan of these puns. You can find him on Instagram at Carlitos_Whey, W-H-E-Y, _protein, or CarlitosWheyprotein.com. You can buy a bunch of this stuff, 2 pounds for $57.87. If you're watching this in video form, you know that I don't really have a sense of what the protein marketplace looks like. I'm not a whey protein person. All my protein comes usually in some breaded form. But I am told that this stuff is good by people who know better than I do. You can go on there. At the very least, even if you don't buy the whey protein, follow Carlito's Whey Protein for all of the whey puns.
Yeah.
Tells
I mean,
you
how awesome
the
is
way
that?
to things, WHEY. There's WHEY Weigh In Wednesdays, where you find out what Carlos weighs. Get it? See what he did?
Yes, yes.
This is really like his opus in life, is
It's
this pun. And how he has managed to we'll show you later the tub and the little Carlos cartoon that
Yes,
he put
yes.
on there. So anyway, that is the last sponsor read of the show. So talk a bit about how the business is expanding, and if somebody is in Miami or finds themselves down here, how can somebody engage with the brand and try the beer?
So the best way to do it, well, one, if you're down here and you don't hear this podcast, you'll probably trip over one of our beers. If you go to a quality local restaurant,
Sure.
or a local beer bar, you're probably going to find our beer. If you go to a shit spot, you're probably not going to find our beer. But the best way to do it is to pop in here to the brewery. I mean, it's just a dope experience. You know, we have live music Fridays and Saturdays and Thursdays. We have events all the time. We got the best karaoke spot in Miami. If you disagree, you haven't been here.
You have a go-to karaoke?
It's Wednesday. Yeah. Oh, karaoke song
Yeah,
for me?
yeah.
Oh, dude. I mean, I'm a big fan of Usher. Pearl Jam.
man.
I'd go Pearl Jam. I'd go Pearl Jam. But if I want to impress no one but myself, I like to go Usher.
Are you dancing too?
I let it all out. I let it all out. You know, I don't believe in doing things half-ass.
Right.
You know, I don't believe in doing things half-ass. So you got to go for it.
That's what you're doing. That's positive.
Exactly. That's what I'm doing. That's positive. Expansion, so it's not really expansion per se. I mean, the amazing partners here at Lincoln's Beard are the 6 partners. Myself and one of the other partners operationally are popping off. We're doing a little side hustle, much like Carlito's Way. Just way less punny.
Hey.
Yeah. I feel like there's more there, but that's all I could come up with on the fly. And way less bad for your health because it's pizza and beer. We're doing a little something out west called Strange Beast, which will be fun. But but definitely the big focus of this, Lincoln's Beard. We have an amazing spot here. That out there is going to be a tiny little spot. But Lincoln's Beard here, we have like 8,000 square feet of just epicness. Hopefully the boys here can throw together some B-roll and show you the rest of it. But really, really just an amazing time. And I am biased, but check out our Yelp and our Instagram and our Facebook for unbiased reviews. So don't mind the ones that talk about my body odor. Sorry.
There you go.
I'm just kidding. There are none.
Let's. I just realized that we didn't touch on this. Talk about where the name came from.
Oh yeah, Lincoln's Beard. So the very short story was the name of my fantasy football team. The very long story was that the partners. All 6 of us, we all had a different idea for the name, which is a huge part, probably the biggest part of any operation.
Was there a runner-up?
At this point,
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I've compartmentalized and shoved it down deep under whatever childhood trauma, But no, so Lincoln's Beard is what we kind of all loosely decided on when I threw it out there and said, hey, what about this name? And everyone said, okay, we'll do that for now. And then we moved on to bigger and better things, and we just left it. But why I named my fantasy football team and subsequently we named our business that is there was a little girl named Grace Bettle. She was a 10-year-old girl in the 1860s. In a time where 10-year-old girls, other than African Americans, had just about as few rights as one could have. So she saw a little pamphlet that her father brought home. Her father was a fan of Abraham Lincoln, who was running for president at the time. Brought home a pamphlet with his face, unbearded, bare face drawn on, and she saw that and said, wow, that is a hideous human being. My words, not Grace's. And so she wrote then candidate Abraham Lincoln a letter and said, my words, not hers. Of course, she was much more well-spoken than I was because this is a 10-year-old in the 1860s. She said, you should really grow a beard up because your chin will look less weak. And women who, of course, couldn't vote at the time will then tell their husbands to vote for you because you're good looking. So he grew it out and won the election and went on to give those African Americans way more rights, with the help of others, way more rights than they had previous to that, and made amazing waves in world history. And I like to think that a little 10-year-old girl had something to do with that. So just the concept of a small spark starting a big fire is always one that I've looked up to, and Grace Bettle is one that I looked up to. And he later met with 11-year-old Grace Bettle and thanked her for her advice and said he took it. So, and not in my words, but that in some way, shape, or form is world history. So, it is proven history. So look that up, and you'll say, okay, he was almost right.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's where the name comes from.
I think that's as good a note as we can ask for to end on. All right, so thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the DADE podcast. You can find us on dademag.com. That's DADEMAG.com. Instagram is DADEIG. Twitter is DADE Tweets. We're also on YouTube. You can look for DADE Mag on YouTube and listen to the podcast on SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music. And also show up next time so you can see Carlos doing sexy tongue stuff behind the camera, trying to get me to break here. All right. Thank you very much. We're
That's
good.
way too distracting.